What's up guys, Andrew Bandit here, and on today's video we are going to be taking a look at the Iliad 7-string from FGN Guitars. I did an unboxing for this guitar about 2 weeks ago, but now it's finally time to do a deep dive on this guitar, see how it sounds, and tell you all the specs and my thoughts on it, of course. So if you're new to this channel and you've never seen one of my demos before, basically what I like to do is show you guys what the guitar sounds like in a full demo mix, and then we're gonna go over the specs of the instrument, and then some isolated sound clips showing off a rhythm tone, clean tone, and lead tone, and then finally, last but not least, my thoughts on the instrument. So with that being said, let's start off with that full demo mix. This is a very short song that I wrote using this guitar with various Neural DSP plugins. It is tuned to drop A using the standard strings that came with this guitar, which are D'Addario 10 to 59 gauge strings, I believe. So with that being said, this is what the FGN Iliad 7-string sounds like in a full demo mix. Okay, so now that you guys have heard how this guitar sounds in a full demo mix, we're gonna go over the specs of this instrument. So the FGN Iliad 7-string has the following specs and features. It's got a bolt-on neck, an ash body, and a maple neck. The fingerboard is a wood that I've never heard of before called grenadillo. Kind of sounds like armadillo. It looks a lot like rosewood, but it's not. It's a little different. Rosewood alternative, you know, guitar companies are getting creative, trying to find alternative wood sources these days. I understand that. It has a 25.5-inch scale length and 24 jumbo circle fretting system frets. We'll talk more about the circle fretting system in just a minute. It has Goto locking tuners and FGN branded hardtail bridge, which is very reminiscent of what you would see on like an Ibanez Prestige model. It has a Fishman Fluence modern humbucker Alnico in the neck and ceramic in the bridge. It has one volume, one tone, and a push-pull switch to select the different voices that you can access with the Fishman pickups. And of course, it also has a 3-way switch, so you can switch between the bridge, the neck, or both. And last but not least, as I mentioned during the intro, it is currently strung up with the D'Addario EXL 110 7-strings, which are 10 to 59 gauge. And of course, it also comes with a nice little gig bag to wrap it all up. Okay, so now that you all know the specs of this instrument, we're gonna go over some soloed tone clips. Of course, we're gonna be starting off with the rhythm guitar tone. So for this tone, I was using the Fortin Nameless Suite from Neural DSP. We're only gonna be using the bridge humbucker for this example because let's be honest, a heavy rhythm guitar tone, that's the pickup you're gonna be using. I will be switching between the two voices, but don't worry, I'll explain what I'm doing as we go. So this is what it sounds like. So as you can hear in that little example there, I did switch between voice 1 and voice 2. To my ear, voice 2 does sound a little bit more like a passive guitar pickup, which normally I prefer, but in this instance, I actually like voice 1 way more. To me, it sounds a little bit more boosted and a little more aggressive, which is great for that down-tuned riffing style, which is pretty much all I do, so that's perfect for me. So we'll play through one more time. I'll play another example of a riff and switch between those two voices so you can hear what I mean. So we'll start on voice 1. So again, not a huge difference between the two voices with this much distortion, but I do personally really like voice 1 a lot more. Voice 2 has a little more bass, which I actually think is worse in this instance, or at least for my style of playing, because I don't want a ton of bass in my guitar tone. That's where I want my bass guitar to sit, right? Okay, moving right along, we are gonna go on to the clean tone. Now, this isn't a perfectly clean tone. It does have a little bit of grit to it, so hopefully you guys don't mind that. I personally find a clean DI track to be incredibly boring, so I'm not gonna do that. I'm sorry to disappoint you. So this is the clean tone that I like to use when I want like a little tiny bit of gain, but a ton of ambience, and it really brings in the atmosphere to a song. So we're gonna start off in the middle pickup selector, which is both pickups enabled at the same time. And we're gonna start off in voice 1, which is again that more like active sounding voice. Let's hear how it sounds. Oh yeah, really quickly before we start, one thing I forgot to mention is I am using the Neural DSP Archetype Plini plugin for this tone. This is how it sounds. So as you can hear with the clean tone, it is way more apparent what each of those voices and switches do. Again, in the heavy rhythm tone, it's a little hard to tell because there's so much gain, but to my ear, this was way more noticeable. I know that this was a little bit of a dissonant riff, and like I said, it has a tiny bit of distortion to it anyways, but we're gonna roll with it. This is as close to a clean tone as I normally get. Okay, last but not least, we are gonna move on to the lead guitar tone. For this example, I am only gonna be using the neck pickup, not the split between the two pickups. I just personally would always use the neck pickup, so that's what we're gonna do. Again, I'll do the same thing twice and switch between the two voices so you guys can hear the difference. And for this lead tone, I am once again using the Archetype Plini plugin from Neural DSP. This is how it sounds. So now that you guys have heard it in a full demo mix, you know the specs, and you heard what it sounds like soloed in different varieties, we are finally going to talk about my actual thoughts on the instrument. So first and foremost, this guitar is pretty damn amazing in terms of quality. So this guitar costs about $12.50 USD, okay? So let's put that out there. So it's like at the low high range to high mid tier price range is what I would say. So with that being said, the quality for that price point, in my opinion, is kind of shocking. The quality per dollar here is quite surprising, like very surprising. This is a lot cheaper than some of the other guitars that I have, and it still definitely punches up in terms of quality. I would hold it, you know, up to some of the guitars that I have, which are $2,000 or $1,800 easily. In addition to that, there is literally nothing aesthetically wrong with this guitar or in terms of quality control. Everything is pretty much perfect. The finish has zero flaws. All of the hardware feels super tight. It stays in tune perfectly. The hardware choices are really good in my opinion. I love that it has locking tuners, and although this bridge, yes, it's like a no-name bridge, I don't really care because it seems to do the job really well. Like I said, it does remind me a lot of the kind of Ibanez Prestige bridges, which makes sense because, again, FGN makes a lot of Ibanez's guitars, so that would be why it feels that way. The only things that I wasn't particularly in love with this guitar were entirely, you know, choices. Some people will like it more because it has these features. Some people will like it less because of these features, right? It's not a custom guitar, it's an off-the-shelf guitar. They can't please everyone, so that's not really their fault. The things that I personally wish were a tiny bit different, again, this is nothing functional, this is just something that I like a little bit more, is I personally am not a huge fan of the flat top, as you can see there. I personally prefer having a 4-arm bevel because I find it more comfy to play. I find with a lot of these flat top guitars, it really digs into my arm when I'm picking. But I know that for a tele style guitar, flat tops are a lot more traditional and there are a lot of people that prefer this. The other spec choice that I wish was a little different for my personal taste is the scale length. 25.5-inch scale 7 strings aren't my personal favorite. They do the trick just fine if you're wanting to stay in like B standard or drop A or around that range. But for tuning down much lower than that, you know, having a baritone scale length would be a little more ideal. And since I personally like to downtune, obviously, I would prefer a baritone scale length. But again, if you're a shredder, this is actually better because those frets are going to be closer together and a little easier to play. So it's a trade-off, right? It depends what you want. If you want to stick to drop A and you like to play super fast and have your fingers close together, this will probably be way better for you. So those are really the only two things that I could point out with this guitar that I wasn't in love with. Again, they have nothing to do with the quality control of the guitar. They feel and sound great, it's just things that I personally like different, I guess. I don't know. It's also very interesting to me that FGN Guitars did a kind of a weird hybrid between very modern specs and very classical specs. So it's a tele shape, but it's a 7-string. It's got the Fishman Fluence humbuckers, which are a very modern pickup. But then on the other hand, they have this thicker neck profile, which is like a medium C. You would think on like a modern guitar that would be a little bit thinner, but they chose to keep it a little more traditional in that sense. Again, same with that flat top of the guitar. That's a little bit more traditional, not quite as modern. And then same with the neck joint. You know, it's a little bit blocky and a lot more like kind of like a traditional Fender neck joint. Again, I would have liked to personally have seen some kind of sculpting going on here so that it didn't feel as jarring with this like hard stop. Does it really matter to playability? No, because I mean, you can get up there very, very easily. Overall, this guitar is crazy good for the price range. It really does feel like a Prestige Ibanez or like that price range, which is like the $2,000 plus range, but for like around $1,250. So you're saving almost half the money just because it doesn't have a brand name on the headstock. It says FGN here instead of, you know, one of the big brands, even though it's made in the same factory with basically the same components and definitely the same care to quality control. So I definitely think this punches way above its price range and I think it is a great buy. The last thing I want to mention really quick, I touched on this a bit earlier, but another interesting thing about FGN guitars that they do a little differently than I think any other guitar company that I've seen before is they have their own fretting system, which they call the circle fretting system. It is very hard to see, I'm going to be honest with you, but apparently every fret has a very, very slight curve to it. So they're not a perfect, you know, straight line. They are a tiny bit curved as the neck goes up. And their explanation of why they do this is actually pretty interesting. The neck does have a bit of a taper to it. Every guitar neck does. None of them are basically, you know, perfectly straight because that would be weird. So with that being said, with straight frets, what you're actually getting is the string is actually hitting each fret at a tiny fraction of a little bit of a different angle, right? Because as the string, you know, gradually gets to the bridge, the angle of the string does change in relation to the fret. So if the fret remains perfectly straight, then that angle between the string and the fret is a little bit different, especially on the higher frets. So their idea, of course, was to simply curve the frets a tiny bit. It's pretty much invisible to the naked eye. It is very hard to tell, but from their explanation, it's basically made so that the string is always a perpendicular 90-degree angle to the fret, no matter how high up you get. Pretty cool idea. I personally didn't really notice any difference in terms of playability. Like I didn't notice that it felt like it was a circular or something like that, but yeah, just wanted to point that out. That is what's going on with the CFS/circular fretting system that they have on all of their guitars. Okay, that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. If you want to know more about the FGN Guitars Iliad 7-string or any of their other models, go take a look at the link in the description or the pinned comment below to take a look at this one and all of their other models. They have tons of other cool stuff on their website that you should definitely go check out. I also want to give a huge thank you to FGN Guitars for sending this one over to me to do a video on. It is much appreciated, and this guitar has been an absolute joy to play. Thank you guys so much for watching. Last thing, if you are a Patreon member, you will get audio downloads, guitar tabs, or a shout out on the screen depending on your tier. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, also go check out my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. That's all I got to say. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.